This man just walked out of Texas Instruments for the last time. The company let him go, and he went and built something worth more than all of Texas Instruments will ever be. Here's what makes it almost unbearable. This is the company that invented the microchip, the single object your phone, your car, and every AI on Earth runs on. It was first. It had everything. So how does a company that invented the future end up handing away $1 trillion fortune to a man it wouldn't even keep? This isn't a rumor. It's on the record. In Texas Instruments' own corporate history, in the Nobel citation for the chip it invented, and in the founding story of the company that man built instead. We'll start with the man who walked out. Then why he walked. Then the one word, no, that cost Texas Instruments the most valuable machine on the planet. His name is Morris Chang. Today he is a legend, the founder of the most important company almost no one outside the industry can name. But for most of his life, he was something else, a Texas Instruments employee. And to understand what Texas Instruments threw away, you first have to understand what it had. For 25 years, a quarter of a century, Morris Chang was a Texas Instruments man. He joined in 1958 and rose almost to the summit. Group vice president, running TI's semiconductor business across the entire world. Not a department, the whole planet's worth of chips. And he was brilliant in a way TI could see. It sent him to Stanford for a doctorate. He finished it in about 2 years. Inside TI, he pushed an idea most executives thought was reckless. Price your chips ahead of the cost curve. Deliberately take a smaller profit today to win the market and the manufacturing mastery that pay off for decades. That is empire-building patience, and Chang had it in the 1960s. He even ran a project where TI had its chips built by an outside factory, IBM. One company designing, another company building. Hold that thought, because it's a seed of the exact idea that will one day make him the most important businessman of the AI age. And remember what invented the chip actually means, because this is the company we're talking about. In the summer of 1958, a TI engineer named Jack Kilby is left alone in the lab while everyone else is on vacation. He's wrestling with a problem the whole industry calls the tyranny of numbers. Too many wires, too many parts. On September 12th, he stands in front of TI's managers, attaches an oscilloscope to a sliver of germanium, and presses a switch. A clean, unbroken wave rolls across the screen. It works. In that instant, inside Texas Instruments, the integrated circuit is born. The microchip, the object the entire 21st century will run on. Kilby will win the Nobel Prize in physics for it. So picture Texas Instruments at its height. It invented the chip. And it employed the man who would go on to build the factory of the whole world. 2 futures. One company, the same building in Dallas. It is one of those moments history loves, where all the power sits in a single room and no one inside it knows how much they're about to lose. Therefore, only one question ever mattered, and nobody there was really asking it. Would Texas Instruments keep him? It didn't. Not with a firing. With something slower and sadder. Indifference. Because by the late 1970s, Texas Instruments had fallen in love with something else. Watch what TI chases instead. In 1967, it invents something small, cheap, and wildly profitable, the handheld calculator. In 1978, a talking toy, Speak and Spell, running on the first single-chip speech synthesizer. Calculators, digital watches, home computers, things you sell by the million to ordinary people, at a fat, dependable margin that arrives every single quarter. And that margin is a drug. It's safe. It never asks you to bet the company on a factory that might not work. So, beat by beat, the company that invented the frontier turns its back on it and walks toward the checkout aisle. We open a file like this every week. A company that held the future and let it slip. Subscribe so the next one reaches you. Because this is the moment TI quietly loses the one man who could have saved it. Morris Chang is a semiconductor man to his bones, and he's watching his own company decide that semiconductors are no longer the point. He rises as high as group vice president, but not to the very top, and as TI leans harder into calculators and watches and toys, he later said his career felt like it had hit a dead end. Then he notices something that will haunt Texas Instruments forever. Standing in TI's own factories, Chang sees that its plant in Japan is making working chips at nearly twice the rate of its plant in Texas. Better trained people, staying longer, more good chips from every wafer. To Chang, it's a flare in the night sky. The future of actually building chips is moving to Asia, and his company is looking the other way. So in 1983, Morris Chang walks out. No drama. He just leaves. And in a rhyme almost too neat to be real, that is the same year Jack Kilby, the man who invented the microchip inside those very walls, retires from TI too. The two greatest semiconductor minds the company ever had exit within months of each other, and Texas Instruments barely looks up. It's busy with the calculators. Chang takes a short stint running another American firm, and then a phone call comes that will redraw the map of the world economy. The call is from Taiwan. The government wants to build a semiconductor industry out of nothing, and it wants Morris Chang to do it. By his own account, they hand him something close to a blank check. And now Chang builds the thing he could never build inside Texas Instruments. It sounds almost too simple. A factory that makes chips for everyone and competes with no one. It designs nothing of its own. It just manufactures better than anyone alive for any company on Earth that has a design, but no factory. A pure foundry. Most of the industry thought the idea was backwards, but he needs money and technology. So Chang goes back to the giants of American chips and asks them to invest. He goes to Texas Instruments, his home of 25 years. And he goes to Intel. Both of them say no. Only one company says yes, the Dutch electronics giant Philips, which puts up money and technology for a stake. Think about how thin that margin was. Two of the biggest names in American technology had the chance to own a piece of the future, handed to them personally by the man who would build it. They passed. A European company on the other side of the world said yes. And so in 1987, with Taiwan's backing and that single yes, Morris Chang founds it, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC. So here's the question this whole story turns on. Was Texas Instruments reckless to let him walk? Or just sensibly cautious about an idea nobody had ever proven? Genius, or a fair bet that went wrong? The comments are open, because in 1986, TI's no looked smart. The pure foundry model was unproven. Nobody had built one and made it work. TI had a profitable humming business selling its own chips and its own calculators. Why pour millions into a stranger's factory 8,000 miles away, built on a model the industry called backwards? Any careful board would have hesitated. Caution isn't stupidity. But caution, repeated often enough, becomes its own kind of catastrophe. Because through the 1990s, the industry tilts exactly the way Chang bet it would. Building a leading-edge chip factory grows so brutally expensive, billions per generation, more each time, that fewer and fewer companies can afford to both design and build. So a new species appears. Companies that design chips and own no factories at all. Apple, NVIDIA, AMD, Qualcomm. Every one of them needs someone to actually build what they draw, and that someone, more and more, is TSMC, the factory of the world, running on the model Texas Instruments carried in Morris Chang's head, and then let stroll out the door. Now put the two companies side by side today. The numbers are almost cruel. TSMC now makes roughly 70% of the world's made-to-order chips, and essentially all of the most advanced ones. When you hear the entire AI boom hangs on a single company in Taiwan, this is that company. In 2025, it took in about $122 billion and kept some $55 billion of it as pure profit. And Texas Instruments? Still a good, profitable company. About $17.5 billion in revenue, $5 billion in profit. Sit with that. TSMC's profit alone, just the money left over, is roughly 3 times Texas Instruments' entire revenue. The company that invented the microchip is now a fraction of the size of the company built by the man it wouldn't keep, and then wouldn't back. And the trillion-dollar promise from the very first second of this video, that's the scale of it. TSMC has been worth more than $1 trillion, the measurable weight of the future that walked out of a Dallas office in 1983. And here's the part that stings the most. Texas Instruments never failed. It made calculators. It made a fortune. It's still here. It simply chose the small, sure thing over the enormous, terrifying one, again and again and again, until the enormous thing belonged to someone else. And that private choice became a national one. Every time you read that America is spending tens of billions to build chip factories on its own soil, the CHIPS Act, the fabs rising in Arizona, see it for what it is, a country trying to buy back a future one of its own companies already had and gave away in 1983. To a man, it let walk down a corridor and out a door. But Texas Instruments isn't the only giant that was first at everything and kept almost nothing. There's a film company that invented the digital camera and then buried it so it wouldn't kill its own film business. Morris Chang would have recognized that mistake in an instant. That story is on screen right now.